Hello, my brothers, my sisters in the Lord. This is Brother Wes, and I want to talk to someone right quick. And basically what I want to talk about, the title of my message is, do you feel unappreciated? Do you feel like people take advantage of you? Do you feel like you're the black sheep of your family? If this is you, I want to talk to you right quick if I can. And see, it's a misconception. Oftentimes many people feel like they're misunderstood, or they're taken advantage of, or they're unappreciated. But what you must realize, and what you must be careful of, man, woman, is that you must look at yourself as well. You do. The Bible tells us to examine ourselves, whether we be in the faith. And see, the thing about it, see, sometimes when we feel like we're hurt, or we feel like someone has done something to us wrong, or you feel unappreciated, oftentimes it's because there wasn't a conversation. There wasn't a conversation. And so a lot of times when some stuff happens and we don't get closure on it, then our mind begins to wander and think, well, they did me wrong, he did me wrong, she did me wrong. When in many cases it wasn't the case at all. Then even some cases, some believers called other people demons or devils and stuff like that, because they didn't do what they thought they should do, and so now they're a devil. But you know, we must examine ourselves. We definitely do. And see, listen to this right here. I think it was in James. James said that we must be swift to hear and slow to speak. James 1:19. And between being swift to hear and slow to speak, there's a process. And in that process, the thing that God gives us as believers is self-control. Also in self-control is learn how to wait. What you must understand as a preacher, stop complaining. See, because one of the definitions of a minister is a servant. You know, a servant, that means being used. So stop complaining about being used, because if you're a believer, if you love God, if you're a servant for God, you're going to be used. And one of the definitions of a servant is a waiter, a waitress, someone who serves. So stop complaining, because when you're complaining about people using you, you're complaining about things not going your way, then you're saying, God, I doubt you. You're saying, God, I don't believe in you. You're showing frustration. You're sound doubt. The same thing that happened to Moses. He became frustrated. So we must be careful of that. See, we have to examine ourselves, because sometimes we think that it's the other person, when it could have been just been a misunderstanding, or it could be just how you feel or how you believe, or you're hurt. See, sometimes we have certain moods or certain beliefs and feelings because we have unresolved feelings in our past of what somebody else or what someone did to us. And so when someone speaks to us in a certain way, then we take it as, we look at our past, that hurt comes back up. It's almost like having a cut or a sore that's being healed, but then you pick it and it comes back open again. And so that's what happens to many people. But you know, it's not always, it's not with the other person. It's not always the devil. But sometimes, most of the time, it's communication. That's our biggest problem as people, as believers. We don't communicate. Because once someone says something, does something to us or against us that we don't like, or it hurts us a certain way, or we feel a certain way about it, or it's against our belief or our religion or whatever, our upbringing, we shut down. And then the moment we shut down, our thoughts begin to run high, and we don't want to resolve it. It's interesting. We don't want to resolve it. But the way to God, and the way for God to move, we must connect. Anything that's powerful or that brings power, there has to be a connection between a negative and a positive. The negative and the positive brings forth power. And so let's examine ourselves and not assuming our emotions. See, because one of the fruit of the Spirit, one of the 9 fruit of the Spirit is self-control, temperance. That means that when something happens to you, or something happens that you don't understand, don't talk about it negatively, but take it to God in prayer. And let God knows, and God will give you the answer. That's why the Bible tells us to trust to God in all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will direct our path. That comes with trusting and believing God. That's patience. When there's a situation, don't respond at the situation, but take the situation to God. And let God give you the clarity. Let God give you the understanding. That's the only way. That's the only way we can become unified. That's the only way we can become powerful. That's the only one that we can become a unified front. We must communicate. And this also applies in a marriage, in a relationship, especially in a marriage. Communicate. Don't assume. Don't get emotional and mad and upset because he or she said something that you didn't like. Stay there and take it and work it out. That's where your blessings at when you work it out. Work it out. That's where your power is at. And that's where your strength is at, is in working it out. Don't run from it. God don't want you to run from it, but God wants you to sit down, think about it, and work it out.